And we are ready. We are on a lovely, but it's going to be hot summer May day in Venice, California. Young Vinny Caggiano, and where are we at with the Beatles?
Okay, so we did You Never Give Me Your Money, but there's more. I mean, it's leading into Sun King, but it takes a long and winding road to get there.
Okay.
So, you know, we got through all the... And that's exactly where we stopped.
Okay.
So, we'll just continue on from there. Let me see if I could find the spot.
Just ain't on red, ain't on yellow, no feeling, nowhere to go.
Okay. Alright. I'm still not in tune with it, but... Alright, so this goes into, one sweet dream. Pick up bags, pick up your bags, get in the limousine. Soon we'll be away from here. Pick up your bags and wipe that tear away. One sweet dream came true, and then it goes on. So let's do the One Sweet Dream part. Now, this progression, that is a motif that comes up throughout this medley, and different keys, everything. I mean, they really, really thought this out. So what we have is an A playing a kind of, you know, rock and roll thing. One sweet dream, pick up your bag. We have an A to a B, pick up your bags to C, E, Z. We'll just look at that because there's a lot packed in there. In fact, I was thinking earlier about this progression. I thought, I can't think of a single theory reason why this works, and then I started to think about it more, and I came up with like 3 different theory reasons why it works.
Huh.
Alright, so what we have is, let's make believe we're in the key of A. We definitely have an A root for the time being.
Okay.
Now we're going to a B. Now, secondary dominants don't have to be 7th chords. They could just be major, and you could get away with it. If you played a 7th, it wouldn't hurt it. Sweet dream. It's not bad. I didn't mean that note. Alright, so we have an A to B going to a C, a half step higher. Now that seems really strange. But let's look at it from one perspective, is that B, if we're in the key of A, B would be the 5-7 of the 5-7 chord. It would be the secondary dominant that leads us to the 5-7 back to 1. But what we have here is a surprise cadence. Instead of going to E minor or E7, it goes to C. Alright? But when we look at C, let's see. Yeah, alright, this is kind of weird, because this should really be the 5-7 of 1, but what it's suggesting is that B7 would have gone to E minor. Which works, I mean, in a different context, of course. But, so, why the C then? Well, what it's doing, again, we talked about this the last time, the C has an E and a G in it. If I put the 3rd below, I get a C chord. If I put the 3rd above, I get an E minor chord.
Okay.
So we have 2 notes in common between C and E minor, and that's why our ears will allow us to hear that C
Oh,
chord.
okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
That's a trick I've been using for years myself. It's to create a surprise cadence. You expect one thing, but another thing happens.
Okay.
Yet it doesn't sound bad.
Are you limited in terms of to kind of a 3-note chord in some cases?
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
You know, I remember like when you extend chords out, it's just like putting a bow tie on the chord. It's still the chord. It just has more
Oh.
fancy
Okay.
garb. Now let's take it and look at it from another perspective. If we're going from, we're claiming that we're in the key of A. We'll skip the B for a second, go to the C. Now the C is its relative minor chord. This is a major, relative major parallel minor switch-up thing we talk about a lot, which the Beatles do a lot. The relative minor chord of C is A minor, but the song's starting in A. The connection is that one root note, A, that, you know, we can kind of go parallel between A minor or A major. So the C is related to the original key of A.
Okay.
Now this is one thing I demonstrated before. You can also use a third perspective. The third perspective is that wandering majors, I call them, right? Sorry. Right. All right. Wandering majors, you can actually form a scale with major chords and they work together. Now the way I theoretically worked this out was, again, it has to do with the relative parallel minor thing again. We're in the key of A, and what we do is take the 1, 4, and 5 major chords of A,
Okay.
right? Now, since A minor is relative to C major, we take the 1, 4, 5 of C major as well.
Okay.
We combine all those 6 chords and we get wandering majors, all right?
Okay.
The B doesn't fit into either scheme, all right? But the B, like if we're temporarily in the key of A major, the B is serving as a secondary dominant. So that's kind of moving us to this next set of wandering major chords.
Okay.
All right. We'll see this absolutely happening in a few of the tunes that Lennon wrote for this medley. All right. So, one sweet dream. Get in a limousine. Now here's a beautiful move. Soon we'll be away from here. Pick up your bags and wipe that tear away. Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Again, there's so many perspectives here. A is now serving as a 5-7 chord going to D, but not D major, D minor,
Right.
right? And he's doing a 2-5, D minor to G7, D minor to G7. Soon we'll be away from here. Pick up your bags and wipe that tear away. Now it could have gone to C. Pick up your bags and wipe that tear away, but it goes to A.
Okay.
All right, and then again, there we have again the relationship between A and C.
Okay.
So the brilliance of this is that since A minor is the relative minor of the key of C, he's suddenly going to D minor, which is the 2 chord of C, the G7, which is the 5 chord of C, and tricking our ears by coming back to A rather than going to C.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's like that simple little thing. I think the brilliance of the Beatles is, and this is something that a lot of people don't get, that they argue with me that the Beatles are way overrated. And I tell them, look, if you knew something about music theory, you wouldn't be saying this.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is highly sophisticated. You know, I mean, you know, Abbey Road is what kicked off prog rock, you know.
Okay.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that. Like, all of a sudden, all these bands were doing, like, you know, bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson, all these bands, they weren't trying to be like the Beatles, but they were in the sense of trying their best to be sophisticated. And frankly, aside from, like, instrumental expertise, like in King Crimson, in Yes, in Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they had nothing over the Beatles in terms of their actual composing. They didn't do anything that was more impressive than the Beatles, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, Yes was really complicated, and they did some really wild instrumental stuff, but I think the difference being that you can hear a certain pretense in progressive rock music from that era, from like early 70s.
Okay.
Whereas the Beatles were honest. I mean, they were just so innocent is not quite the word, but they were just so open to newness and let's do this, let's try that, you know. And it wasn't for the sake of
without the attitude.
without the attitude. They weren't saying let's show the world how amazing we are. They
Yeah.
were just doing it because they loved it, you know. And I'm not saying that Yes and these other bands didn't like what they were doing. They did. But I definitely sense a whole lot more pretense in all that music. If you look at point to the lyrics of bands like Yes or Rush or these progressive rock bands, it's just so full of it, you know, pseudo-spiritual philosophy, yada, 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 you know. Beatles never really traversed that territory. When they did, they were sincere,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
So, yeah, soon we'll be away from here. Pick up your bags and wipe that tear away. Reiteration, one sweet dream. Now we bring back this that we saw kind of like in, well, this whole art, basically these are arpeggios of chords, okay? And you don't need a definition of arpeggio.
No, you've gone through that. Yeah.
When you look at Here Comes the Sun, you get arpeggios of chords. So, when we come out of Sweet Dream Came True Today, what we have is a C. This is part of a G. And then up to A, there we go again. That C and A relationship. I think they were very, very aware of this, and they were really, really, you know.
Who's the writer on this? The main writer?
This section is definitely McCartney.
It is. Okay.
However, I think Harrison might have kicked in and said, hey, you know, when we get to that C, let's do this lick I came up with. You know, because you can hear, like, Harrison's influence in the band Cream, for example. Harrison wrote a song for Cream called Badge.
Okay.
And there's a middle section, a famous, let me see, told you about the time you drove my car. Yeah. So it's been years. He wrote that into the song, and this is like post-Beatles, you know, after just a little after Abbey Road. So you can hear that this was Harrison's thing. It was a phase he was going through. I like these arpeggios, and he was actually quite masterful at coming up with super cool licks like that.
Ah, okay.
So we get this today came true. Today, yes it did. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that stuff. This will come back later on. Now what we have is, I don't think they knew exactly what way they were going to transition. Remember, these are little bits and pieces they had laying around.
Yeah.
So they had to find a way to stitch it all together. So they go into Sun King after this, all right, which is in the key of E, and they were, traversing between C and A.
Right.
Not hard to get to E from there, but I won't say they cheated. I don't know why they decided on this. Maybe because it might have been because of the huge tempo change that occurs. But what they did was they segued with the sound of crickets. All of a sudden you hear crickets, and it feels like it's nighttime, and then you hear... Right? Very, very Beatles, that 6th chord. It hails back to their really old days.
We've got about half a minute left to 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Then why don't we
Stop?